Please don't go away. Please don't go away. Please don't go away. Is this how it's supposed to be?
Yeah, see.
This is from one of my all-time favorite poets. I exist as I am, and that is enough. Walt Whitman.
I exist as I am, that is enough. Interestingly enough, that's another good one for my message today. Another good one. Things sometimes are so synchronous. Coffee and Conversation a couple weeks ago, I put this quote up on the board. Happens on every other Saturday. And the quote was, "Dogs never worry about the meaning of life." Dogs never worry about the meaning of life. And there's some wisdom in that, right? Dogs knowing they just live the moment, man. They just live the moment. But we as human beings, we think about the meaning of life, don't we? We have the ability to think about the meaning of life, to want to live a fulfilled life, don't we? We think about that. And rightly so. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that either. There's nothing wrong with the perspective of a dog who lives in the moment. It can be both. But we have that ability in us to think about the meaning of life. What it means, what it feels like to feel fulfilled, what it means to be aware and awake and engaged. Like we think about those sorts of things. Am I the only one? Y'all look confused by this. Something to be like satisfied. We want to feel satisfied about our life, don't we? I do. I want to feel satisfied. And I think so, because I think we want to be able to find our place in the world. Doesn't that sound like about right? Like I want to find my place in the world. And there's a great story about that in the Bhagavad Gita. I don't know how many of you have read the Bhagavad Gita, but it's a story of Krishna and Juna and that quest. And I'm not going to go into that, but there's a book written by Stephen Cope called The Great Work of Your Life that he uses that wisdom in the Bhagavad Gita to do exactly this, to investigate and to reveal to Arjuna exactly the purpose of his being here. It's called in the Hindu tradition Dharma, D-H-A-R-A-R-M-A, Dharma. In other words, my duty, my calling, like what I am born to be and to be here. And I think that that's what it's about. I think that's what it's about, like our yearning to feel fulfilled, So there's a great story in this book, The Great Work of Your Life, of one of my heroes, and his name is Henry David Thoreau. Now, Henry David Thoreau was, he finished Harvard Law School, he finished his studies at Harvard in 1843. And at that time, he had been working with his mentor, Ralph Waldo Emerson, up in Concord, Massachusetts. And he decided that he was going to go off to New York City because he wanted to be a writer. And he knew that if he was going to be a great writer, New York was the place to be. Even in 1843, it was the place to be, where he could rub elbows with all the current great American authors and craft his writing to the fashion of the day. That was his goal. So 2 years after he graduated, he said, that's what I'm going to do, and he moves to New York City. And in 18 months, he publishes one slim little book review, and he is an abysmal failure. He's an abysmal failure. He feels homesick. All he wants to do is get back to nature and back to where he was in Concord, Massachusetts. He feels defeated and deflated, and so he goes back. He goes back to Concord, Massachusetts. He goes to the little cabin in the woods. He goes back to the family pencil factory, and he goes back to his mentor, Ralph Waldo Emerson. And when he gets there, he writes this. When he gets there, he writes this. Be humbly who you are. Be resolutely and faithfully what you are, not who you think you should be. Be humbly who you are. Be resolutely and faithfully what you are, not who you think you should be. And so he began his inner journey to his voice. And he decided to be who he was, instead of who he thought he should be by moving to New York and being this great writer. He came back and he was humble. He stayed where he was. He walked and he sauntered around the woods in Concord. His mother made him sandwiches and tea so he didn't have to go to the grocery store. He spent all mornings drinking tea and reading great European authors. And everybody in Concord in the 19th century thought he was a loafer and a loser. Because that's all he did. That's all he did. But he decided, and he knew by going inside himself, that this was his to do. And he was unapologetically who he decided he wanted to be. And he didn't care about the naysayers, and he didn't care about... In fact, he wrote the great book Walden. Many people have read Walden. Many people have read his great essay, Civil Disobedience. You know, when Walden was in first print, 2,000 copies took about 8 years to sell. All right? He was no great author during his life, during his short life. But he stayed committed to it, and he trusted himself, and he stayed committed. That, my friends, is following your Dharma, following your calling, following your duty, as it's written about in the Bhagavad Gita. And this much later, we still read him. So this is some instruction about following Dharma. This is some instruction. Many great Dharma stories involve failure, which he did famously in New York, according to his own words. Failure. Of trying something, of expecting it to be this big thing. I've got to make it big. If I want to be a writer, I've got to do this. Of trying it, of ignoring critics. Of ignoring your critics as part of Dharma story. And it's not really you arrive at your Dharma, it's really a trek toward Dharma. That's the name of this lesson. Trek toward Dharma. And that's really what Thoreau did, didn't he? He trekked toward Dharma. He actually downsized his dream. And maybe not really downsized so much as right-sized it. He right-sized his dream. He right-sized his dream. It turns out that what I think I should do and trying to fit in and ignoring critics and taking those risks, that's all a part of a trek toward Dharma. That's all a part of it. That's all a part of it. There's this misconception, I think, about Dharma, my duty, my calling. And that is, well, if I know what it is, it should be easy, shouldn't it? Everyone should support me so they could see how great I am. Right? Everybody should stop their lives and recognize me, and I should become famous. I should at least be acknowledged. Someone should at least give me an award, some kind of award. Right? We think that's what it is. It's not that at all. It's not that at all. That's not what it is. And Thoreau's story proves that, I think. It's more about awareness. It's more about growth. It's more about practicing letting go. It's about listening. It's about changing course. That's the other thing about Dharma thing. People think, well, it's just this one thing and I have to do it all my life. I don't think so. Even the Olympic athletes know they will not be Olympic athletes at 55. It's not going to happen. Right? At 25, at 16, whatever it is. But the Dharma changes. It doesn't have to be this one thing. It doesn't have to be this one thing. It is a trek toward Dharma. A trek toward Dharma. My trek has been all over the place. All over the place. My undergraduate degree was in landscape architecture, and I did that for a while, and I decided I made it to my office in this company outside of Washington, D.C., and I thought, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. I think I'll quit my job and go back to school. And then I studied to be at George Mason University with wetland science. And I got a degree in environmental science and policy. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go change the world with wetland science, and we're not going to have all this flooding. And 2 weeks later, I was diagnosed with cancer. Oh, no, that's not going to work, right? A couple years later, I decided it was too dense in Washington, D.C. I think I'll move to North Carolina, quit my job again. Moved to North Carolina. Did I know anybody here? No. Did I have a job here? No. Did I know what I was going to do? No. So I brought my stuff here and immediately went on a little trek out to the Southwest because I wasn't ready to settle down. I come back, I meet a guy in a bar because I went out to dinner at Hieronymus on Market Street, and he said, oh, you should be a FEMA inspector. I'm like, all right, well, I could do that. So I went to Raleigh, got my little iPad computer thing, and I was a FEMA inspector for a while. All right, I'll do that. What in the world, it worked for a while. And then I decided, no, I don't want to do that forever. What else could I do? What else could I do? Well, I moved out to the Southwest for a while. I worked at an alfalfa ranch and a bed and breakfast, and backed the wait staff at a karaoke bar. And then I thought, this is too far out. I don't think I'm ready for this. It was beautiful. I did a lot of hiking. I saw a lot of red rocks. I came back to Wilmington. I was like, nah, I think I need to get back here, do something else. Got a job with Boney Architects as a construction contract administrator. Worked there for about 1.5 years, and then they wanted me to do all these jobs at once, and I was like, you're setting me up for failure. I told the president of the company that. He said, well, you're going to have to do it. So I said, I quit. I quit. I left my job, and I said, listen, I'll contract back to you and do 2 of those. He said, okay. So that's what I did for a while. You get the theme of this? Who the heck knows what my Dharma was? I was just living what was in front of me. One thing after the next. Met Renee soon after that. We went to the Unity Church. I started studying to be a licensed Unity teacher. Who knew that was going to happen? Who knew that was going to happen? In the meantime, I was still doing my construction work. Oh, and I was an energy manager for New Hanover County Schools for a while. That was fun. Almost moved to Durham, took a church there. Didn't work out, helped close that church. Came back, what am I going to do? Took another job with the school district doing some... see how this goes, round and round? You think I've been a minister all my life, don't you? Wrong? Wrong. It's not. But this is what I am today. This is where I am today. And you all have a story like that. Maybe not so many quitting the job stories, but like, I didn't know, but I kept following this and then following that and then deciding, no, that's not it. Well, maybe that is. Well, maybe I'll try this over here. I was going to move to Charleston because I met a guy down there and we were going to start some kind of community down there. And Renee says, why do we have to move to Charleston? Why don't you start it right here? And Spiritual Soul Center. All right? So, thanks, Renee. It wasn't easy. Not everybody agreed. Not everyone was supportive along the way. It was just my trek. It was my path. Just to say, you have your path and your trek. You decide. You know what? Your life is way too important to live somebody else's. Your life is way too important. No matter what it looks like to you and how inconsequential it might seem, it's way too important to live somebody else's life. That's not yours to live. Your life is your life. Your Dharma, your duty, your calling, yours. Not anybody else's, not compared to anybody else's. It's yours. That's it. You're not required to fit into some artificial mold. Your life and your Dharma is essential to everything else. It's essential. It's essential for you, and it's essential to the whole. And it doesn't matter if anybody agrees. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if anybody thinks it's the best thing for you. When I went back to graduate school, I called my dad and I said, I'm going back to graduate school. He said, are you asking me for any money? I said, no. He said, go for it. That's how he wanted to know that I was taking responsibility for my choices. I wasn't asking for somebody else to chip in. I was doing it because I was being called to do it. And I was figuring out a way. You know what I did? I rented my condo out. I let it go. I moved in with 2 roommates. I took a part-time job. That's what I did. Take responsibility for my dream and my Dharma. That's a part of it as well. Do you know what people who are dying appreciate the most in their life? Are they looking back on, you know what they're looking back on? I've been with some people who are dying, some wonderful people who are dying. They look back on and notice their kindnesses, the kindness that was done to them and the kindness they were able to do. And they look back on a life, the lucky ones look back on a life that was fulfilling. The times they fell down and got up, the times they offered their best, the times they cared for the world, the times that they were cared for. That's what people who are lucky are able to do on their deathbed, is to realize that my life mattered. My little corner of the world, it mattered. I mattered being there. It mattered that I was there, and it mattered a whole lot. That's instructive, I think. That's instructive, I think. You know, Thoreau came to this understanding that he was a transcendentalist. He realized, he said, I am a mystic, I am a transcendentalist, and I am a lover of nature. I am a natural philosopher. That's what I am. That's what, here I am. That's it. That's it. Call me a loafer, call me a loser, that's what I am. And part of transcendentalism has this as a core tenet, and that is the supremacy of insight over logic. The supremacy of insight over logic. What it looks like on pen and paper, and with the bank account, and with this and that, the supremacy of insight over all of that, over logic of any kind. That's it. And another thing he came to understand is the essential nature of every single Dharma, every single calling, regardless. There is no calling, in other words, that's less than any other calling. None. The unity of all creation, that's another concept of transcendentalism. The unity of all of it. Insight, intuitive understanding, to perceive deeply and clearly that there is no I, there is only we. There is no I. You know, I listened to the Democratic National Convention on Thursday night. It's the first time I've ever done it, and I'm old. But we were on vacation, and we didn't have to get up the next day, and so we decided we were going to do that. And one of the speakers on that Thursday was Senator Mark Kelly from the state of Arizona. And he said this, his talk was, he said, when I flew as an astronaut, or if I was flying a combat mission with the U.S. Navy, I did not do it alone. There was a whole team of people that allowed me to do that. And I thought, bravo, bravo. And that is the same concept that is accurate with all of humanity and even beyond humanity. And that is, we are all a part of that. I mean, can you imagine a soccer team with just goalies? Yeah, pretty boring, right? A soccer team with just goalies. What about a hospital with nobody to clean up after the surgeons, the nurses, and the patients? Would you even walk in? No. It takes everybody. It takes everybody. There is no one who is unimportant when it comes to that. No one. Here's a story that I've shared with you before that's worth repeating here. And this is the story of the Hindu god Indra. Indra was the thunderbolt god. He was the greatest god in ancient Vedic pantheon. Maybe he's trying to get here. He lived in the sacred mountains in the Hindu tradition, the sacred Mount Meru, considered the center of the world in Vedic cosmology. Just the place for a great god to reside. And around his celestial home, Indra had flung a vast net, a web stretched out infinitely in all directions. Each vertex or node of this net was held together by a glittering jewel. And there were infinite nodes, and so there were infinite jewels. Just what does that mean? Just this. Each gem in the net represents a human soul. And though each of these jewels is unique, it also reflects in its polished surface the image of all other jewels. Each jewel in Indra's net represents both itself as a particular jewel and at the same time the entire web. So any change in one gem would be reflected in the whole. Every object in the world is not merely itself, but involves every other object and is in fact everything else. Therefore, it is the sacred duty of every individual human soul to be utterly and completely itself. To be that jewel at that time and in that place. And to be that jewel utterly. That's it. To be that jewel utterly. Utterly that. So what team is that? Here's the team. Living our Dharma, living our calling, living our duty. We're on the Cosmic Pulse of Life team. The Cosmic Pulse of Life team. We're on the Beyond the Human Race team. We're on the bigger picture you have no idea how to comprehend team. That's the team we're on. All that as us. Could you believe it? I mean, your soul knows this. Your soul knows this. Transcendentalism says your insight informs you of what that is. And it doesn't need to be the big thing. In fact, the bigness is in the smallness. It's into doing this thing, whatever this thing is. Knowing from the inside, knowing with insight that you know that's yours to do. And that's yours to be. Oh, are you feeling it? Do you believe it? Here's what Thoreau wrote. He said, do what you love. Know your own bone. Gnaw at it, bury it, unearth it, gnaw it again. Know your own bone. I mean, know your bone. Know your bone. That's what it is. Whatever it is, however humble it is, to know that it's exclusively and exquisitely and without exception yours to do. Yours to do. At this time, in this way, at this place, here. Is it a relief to know that that's the truth? Is it a relief to just follow those few things? I mean, really what it's saying to me is just be kind and follow your heart. That's it. Be kind and follow your heart and release all the expectations of what other people should and shouldn't do. Thoreau died before any of his writings were thought of as amazing. You know? He was gone. He was gone. He didn't make any money off of it. He was done. If that's how we define success, we might be disappointed. But if we define success as being in love with what we're doing, where we are, and know that is essential to the whole, can we not walk on this earth feeling immense pride and satisfaction? And that's the way I want to walk. And I invite you to walk with me with that, yes? So let's take a deep breath and go into meditation this morning. And consider a life well lived. To know, Perry's lyric said, I'm just you and you're just me, and it's only true if we believe. There it is. We are all one. We are all a jewel, an amazing jewel in the net. What jewel are you? How many facets do you have? How many others are reflected in your magnificence? And you in theirs? It can't be another way. Whatever it is, how humbly to be who you are and to know to the core of your being that it is exclusively and exquisitely and without exception your calling and indeed your duty in this world, at this time, in your way. For a few moments, to be still. I felt that awful burden of wanting to be special, of wanting to be better, of wanting to experience every possible adventure in this life, wanting to be an expanded self. Oh, for God's sake, it's just too damn much work to be an expanded self. Couldn't I just be an ordinary self? We cannot master everything, taste everything, understand everything, drain every experience to its last dregs. But if we have the courage to let almost everything else go, we will probably be able to retain the one thing necessary for us, whatever it may be. If we are too eager to have everything, we will almost certainly miss even the one thing we need. We are not called to everything. We are just called to what we're called to. What a relief. And amen.